I think that Trump feels he has a significant mandate from the people to do whatever he wants. That despite having been convicted of numerous felonies before being reelected, in fact, being elected in spite of being, convicted of so many felonies, I think he just feels at this point that he is free to do what he would like to do, and the gloves are off.
Is it that he seems to be much more the guy who is not putting up a show, or at least putting up a different show, different enough to make people feel like that's the reality and that's not some political BS being painted for people to just appreciate, or like an act generally?
I mean, are you asking in a sense, why do people like him?
Yeah.
I mean, this is a great conversation, and I think people will be studying this for the rest of time.
Yeah. I'm like, what is Trump doing? What does he want?
Well, when I was done watching the AI video of him licking Elon's toes, and then I watched the AI video of Zelensky slapping him in the Oval Office.
Yeah.
I did turn on that video quickly and see, and listen, Trump is, he's a megalomaniac. I don't know, because Elon, I'm not sure if he wants his vice president to be able to speak freely. Elon likes having the power. But no, I don't think Elon's president. I do think he bought the presidency. I think there's a difference. But yeah, I don't know. I think he just likes to say, we used to have the saying diarrhea of the mouth.
Yeah.
And I guess Trump is diarrhea of the fingers, and he can't stop himself from typing stuff.
When we first decided to do this episode, Trump had just been elected, and we planned to talk about the major seismic shifts that led to his return, because it was almost unthinkable to see that somebody goes through this turbulent time and returns to the Oval Office. Today, it's been 41 days since President Trump returned to the Oval Office, and the early weeks of his administration has been nothing short of disruptive for most people, from sweeping immigration crackdowns to controversial pardons of every single person who was involved in the January 6th insurrection. Trump's first month back in power has sparked intense debate home and abroad. Today, instead of our original topic, we are going to break down all the major developments in these 41 days and basically look at what it means for Americans and the world, because they are just too intense to ignore at this point. I'm joined by Michael Fabman, who has been following American developments very intensely, because that's his home country. He currently lives in Hong Kong. And Michael, thank you really for joining the Shaft Conversations this morning to discuss what is for most Americans very, very troubling to watch, and sometimes just even surprising and shocking to a very, very intense degree. Thanks for joining us on this conversation.
Yeah, you're welcome, Andrews. I think shocking is a good word to use. I think it's been a whirlwind. I think there's a lot of confusion, although I think part of Trump's plan is to throw so many things out there that people don't know which are the real issues they should be challenging, or which are actually real issues that he actually believes in and is actually going to follow through on. So it's great to be here. Thank you for having me, and I look forward to this conversation.
Thank you. For listeners and for viewers, the Shaft Conversations is a special show on the Shaft podcast where we interview high-profile guests like Michael, and we talk about very nuanced and in-depth issues on the most important things that are happening in the world, from climate to artificial intelligence to politics. And on this show, we have what some people call very hard conversations from the very hardest perspectives, and explore the hard and most uncomfortable truths around them. So if you've joined us on this show to go through this discussion, then I would simply say that you are probably bold and ready to have the most controversial conversations from a place of objective reality. And first, I wanted to say thank you to our viewers as well. So to kick things off, looking at this whirlwind, like you put it, from immigration raids to foreign freezes on almost every single aid package you can think of, how would you characterize Trump's second term so far? And in your view, how is Trump 2.0, as many people call it, like an evolution of some software? How is it different from his very first term?
Well, I guess I would start with the first, the second part of it, and how would I classify it as different is I think that Trump feels he has a a significant mandate from the people to do whatever he wants. That despite having been convicted of numerous felonies before being reelected, in fact, being elected in spite of being, convicted of so many felonies, I think he just feels at this point that he is free to do what he would like to do, and the gloves are off. And what scares me about that is that Trump has been a con man, a grifter, and someone who only looks after himself his whole life, and somehow significant millions of Americans viewed him as the better choice. Although I understand the dislike of maybe the other party or the other candidate per se, at the same time, it is amazing to me that someone who doesn't have many former employees or even friends saying kind words about him, when you have someone like that, I find it hard to believe that some people would trust that person could be trusted. And I think that's what shocks me. But I think, sadly, as I said, I think that has given him the belief of a mandate to do what he likes. And again, those executive orders that have come so popular in the last few presidential terms, because I don't want to blame him alone for these executive orders, but they have really become a thing in the last 3 to 4 presidential terms that I never really had heard before. And it seems to give the president these underlying powers.
I mean, before we get into a lot of detail, just one simple question. Has Trump shocked you yet?
I don't want to say Trump has shocked me, because I don't think that, because I think the worst in general about him. I've had a lot of talks with friends back home. No, I don't necessarily share everything I think about the guy, because they seem to like him. And it is not a political, per se, issues that I don't like him. It's more the personal person. A man who claims to be, he's Christian, and his favorite book is which book? You forget what it's called. The Bible. That's it. I don't know if he knows what it's called, to be honest. I know he didn't put his hand on it when they swore him in this time, in fear that it would go up in flames instantly. So I think he hasn't shocked me. I think what we saw this weekend was incredibly disappointing. The rhetoric that has continued to pour out of his mouth is incredibly disappointing. The people he's surrounded himself with are just mind-boggling, inept, and very disappointing. But again, when you are someone who only surrounds yourself with yes men, and your Secretary of Defense is going to be who was a Fox News commentator, and now your head of the FBI is, I'm not sure what he was, but I know he wasn't qualified. And now his deputy head of the FBI, I don't know his name. I apologize for saying your name terribly. Also someone who has no FBI experience and is not qualified for the job. So I think when you get someone who's not qualified and they surround themselves with people who are unqualified, you have a disaster waiting. So surprised, no. Disappointed, certainly, because some of my friends and family who supported him, assured me that he was
much better than he's doing.
Oh yeah, that he would come in with a better attitude and really solve problems. And as anyone who's bought an egg in the U.S. could tell you, his promise that on day one grocery prices would go down. Well, they continue to go up. A friend shared a very interesting website with me the other day, and it was a Trump tracker. It was the amount of days he's played golf since entering the office. I believe at that point it was 36. It was 10 out of 36 days he'd been playing golf. And I believe they also tracked the price of gas and the price of groceries, both of which had been steadily going up in the 36 days since he took office. So
I think the thing that Trump does so well is he puts up a show to distract everyone from everything that's actually going wrong in the country, because Biden would have been so quiet by this point. Everyone is finding something else to talk about. So they'll definitely start talking about gas prices or oil prices or food prices. But now you are talking about the Oval Office and Friday and the executive orders he signed. So you actually never get the time to reach the exact issues that you need to be talking about.
Well, you have started to hear it from some of the commentators on news networks that we need not pay attention to all of the things he says and to all of his executive orders. It's really that we need to find the most important ones that need combating in a sense, or need discussing, need raising awareness to the public. That being said, it's pretty scary. All the issues, everything he says is scary. So we could highlight just the one or two important ones a week, but it sadly doesn't really.
He does too much for the media to catch up. He just like flusters you with a lot of things at the same time that you barely have the time to go through it.
Yeah.
But one question I wanted to ask though is the reason why people sort of looked to him and voted for him even after all the chaos, especially in the last 2 years with his lawsuits, his convictions and all that. Is it that he seems to be much more the guy who is not putting up a show, or at least putting up a different show, different enough to make people feel like that's the reality and that's not some political BS being painted for people to just appreciate or like an act generally?
I mean, are you asking in a sense, why do people like him?
Yeah.
I mean, this is a great conversation, and I think people will be studying this for the rest of time.
Yeah.
I've read a few articles recently that maybe he just speaks what the common man would like to say, and everyone's too afraid to say it.
Yeah.
He says things that sound real and that what politicians normally wouldn't say. So there is that to him. I also think there is a significant hatred for the other side of the aisle. Sadly, in a country where there is truly a two-party system, where really only one party, a person from one of the parties could really hold such a high office. I think there's a lot of this hatred that exists, whether it's based on policy or fear. I mean, the talk that Biden is corrupt and Biden is a criminal, I don't shy away from that. I'm not a Biden fan per se. I mean, Biden has been in federal politics and government for 50 plus years. There's no way you're not corrupt, and there's no way you haven't committed some level of crime in maintaining office and enriching your family, and whatever he did to protect his son, and issues like that. I could see why people are strongly opposed to the liberal Democrats, as they fear the communists. But Biden wasn't that. I mean, if anything, Biden was a corrupt, and he was not the ultra liberal that these people fear. I think DEI, in a sense, is very divisive. There's a group of people in America, and I will say poor white people, who feel like they've been left behind. And they don't feel it's right that they get the short end of the stick because of DEI policies. So I can understand that. But none of the policies that Trump enacts, I would say, help in any way these people. When Trump enacts his tax cut for the rich, this theoried trickle-down economics that was so popular in the 80s, which has been proven over and over again over the last 4 years to not work. It doesn't. There's no trickle-down. There's a consolidation of wealth to a level that, as of now, we've never seen before. And what I find disappointing personally when I have discussions, and I know this is off topic a little, when I have discussions with people who like Trump, they get back into, what do you want, socialism? And it's like, well, no, but at the same time, the government is there to help people. And if there are homeless people or people who can't afford healthcare and people who literally can't afford housing, and the government is there to step in a sense. And paying tax cuts to the rich is not going to help anyone in this situation, because they don't need those tax cuts, especially when they're making money at such a greater rate than ever before. So taxing them really would only hurt them for a few months before their money would recover for whatever they were taxed.
Interesting. we would get into especially DOGE and Elon Musk and trying to ensure government efficiency with cutting funding and all that and the DEI stuff in a bit. But I wanted to ask, with this assessment that you've given and what you've seen from discussing with people, how is the political landscape really in America shifting? Is it that we sort of should start seeing, let's say, politicians from the other side who start just breaking down the political veil and just being much more blunt and objective to people in order to make them feel like we are not really putting up an act and sort of have certain elements of Trumpism about them? Is it that's what people are expecting now, to be able to break away from the Trump culture, or at least to present a competitive front? Or do you think, just like Joe Biden did, by being a much more moderate liberal, by consolidating as many people and across many fronts, that is the way to sort of break Trumpism again?
The way to break Trumpism will have to be going back towards the middle. And I was listening to a podcast about this yesterday, and kind of agree in a sense, is that you need the middle ground, because that's the only thing that'll grab the Republicans who are voting for Trump because they don't support the ultra liberals, to get them off of Trump. I hope some of his actions in the last 40 days. I mean, but we're still 3 years away from an election.
Yeah.
So I don't know. We'll see in the midterm election, which is still, almost 2 years away, how much his behavior and how much his policies will actually affect him. So we won't really know. I don't think it's as easy as saying, no, you need someone blunt on the left, because the left side is very divisive in a sense, because you do have the people who are ultra liberal who do believe in sense of socialism, communism, and then you have people who are much more moderate and just kind of want people to be able to be treated equally. Yeah. And then you have the people who are really just, still maybe financially conservative, but socially are liberal. And I think that's where I would put myself. I think I would say that generally fiscally more conservative, but I do think that people are equal. But I also think this is a tough one, and I hate to highlight, I think when you get to what even liberals have now called extremism and too much is, the debate about trans and sports and that. And I would say generally I'm very liberal, but I think this is somewhere where, as someone who's into sports, feels like an issue like, should we have trans athletes playing with female sports? And my take on that is no. And I'm sorry that this seems to be needing a president to determine this, but and that gets people though. And I hate to say it, that should not be the biggest issue in America right now. People being able to afford housing should be a bigger issue, and people having jobs and minimum wage being raised to somehow meet inflation while the rich are getting insanely rich. That's a bigger issue. But it does come up, and like when you have someone who starts speaking about issues like that as being their platform, it's like, well, no, that's not my platform. Go back to realistic platforms that really matter to people, like giving people, I'm a fan of free school lunches for kids. I get it costs the taxpayers lots of money, but what also costs the taxpayers lots of money is having kids who don't get good educations and grow up to be pretty much productive members of society, and worse. So of course, there's certain issues I'm fully supportive of. There's certain issues I don't necessarily see eye to eye. But to say that someone comes out bluntly as a left wing, I just don't see it. I think one, they would offend too many people, their own people.
But this divisiveness on the left, really, it used to be a characterization on the right, and it's sort of, I think it still is. It's probably just people are too scared of Trump to speak against him at this point. So when after he lost the election, you would notice there was a litany of right-wing politicians, the GOP members, who came out and said, he's crossed the line, he's never coming back from this, he's definitely not going to be here for the next election. And people felt Trump was done, so they could just now feel free to speak their mind about him. And now everyone is back in line. Every single one of them.
It's worse than that.
Every single one of them has fallen in line now, because they know you either need him to retain your seat or he's coming after you.
Well, they had a few more people spoke out, I would say. Maybe a few more people spoke a little ill of him, but they still were very guarded because he still really kept a firm grip on the party in a sense. And now it's completely his party. I'm pretty sure his daughter-in-law is the president of the Republican National Party. I don't know. Is that true? Is it Lara Trump? Are they any relation, Lara Trump and Donald Trump?
I'm not sure.
I'm pretty sure she's married to one of his kids that he doesn't like, but not the one he likes at least.
Let me just Google.
Yeah, but you can Google that. But yes, Lara Trump being the head of the Republican National Committee. Basically, he has pushed the people who were his opponents away and outside. People like Chris Christie, who are still condemning him. People who speak that he doesn't belong where he is in this position as president. He doesn't deserve it. So he can't be trusted.
Laura is married to one of Donald Trump's sons.
Yeah, Eric, I believe. Yeah. So like this idea that people were willing to speak out slightly, but not really. I mean, Nikki Haley stood up for herself in a sense. She didn't come crawling back to him for a cabinet position. Chris Christie stood up for himself, but generally everyone else kowtowed to him. Bill Barr, who was his, he's back in line in a sense. Someone who, I believe I was watching the Last Week Tonight clip before I came in earlier, and John Oliver was talking about how Kash Patel are now head of the FBI. When he tried to give him that role in his previous administration, Bill Barr said over his dead body. Well, I guess it didn't take his dead body. It just took a different person in his seat who wouldn't stand up to Trump. People that were in Trump's cabinet in his first run who don't have a single nice thing to say about him and don't think he should be there. I don't see. I don't think the other side, the problem isn't going to be solving it with a Trump-esque candidate. The problem will be solved with someone who can appeal to the people he has finally turned off in the Republican Party, who also doesn't appeal to the ultra-liberals who are driving certain issues that really don't hit home with the moderates, I would say, on both parties. So
on one hand, and this is a view I held in the lead up to the election, on one hand, he seems a lot more organized, a lot more politically mature, and sort of a lot more set in stone or clear about what he wants to do. There is little political backtracking, no matter how crazy what he does is. It's sort of, he's clear in his mind what he wants to do, which is more like a contrast to the first term where he was more of experimenting to some degree to find what exactly he wanted to do, what can he do, and what can he not to do. Now it's like he sat, looked at every single legal power or powers that be that the president can weaponize, and came to the Oval Office clear in his mind what exactly he wants to use those powers for. But there's also some little bit of aggression to the use of this power. I don't know whether my assessment of exactly Trump's misguided political maturity is right.
Yeah, I wouldn't call it mature. I wouldn't call it a political maturity. I think, in a sense, what really happened is in his first presidency, he was actually trying to be a president, and he was trying to play by the rules to some extent. And obviously, by packing the courts to the extent he was able to, he kind of unleveled the playing field in his own way. So instead of being prosecuted further for more felonies, he kind of was able to gain this level of immunity, which I think still has people confused.
If the Supreme Court says a sitting president can never be convicted for anything he does during his presidency.
Yeah, and I think that's still open to interpretation in a sense, and I still think that's... If it is true, it was poorly used by Biden to have Trump assassinated. Not that he should have. No one should ever do certain things like that. Violence is never the answer unless you read history books. Violence is never the answer unless you've read a history book and you find out that sometimes they're just completely the answer. But what I would say in answering your question, I think they did prepare for a second run. I think they fully knew the powers they would have, and they would be a lot left unchecked based on the Supreme Court that they have put into place. And I also think that not that he surrounded himself with just yes men. I think people who wanted to be yes men approached him with a plan on how he could make America great again, which led to this whole Project 2025, which Trump, again, denied knowing anything about in campaigns. And yet everyone in power has some sort of tie to this.
To Project 2025.
Including, I believe, his chief of staff, who's the guy who wrote it. Correct me if I'm wrong there. So this policy that they built to really destroy America, or at least to destroy the freedoms of minorities and women in America, they have now been empowered to move forward with their plan. And what that means is really, it is kind of scary in a sense. I would say, listen, as a Jew, I'm not worried in terms of this rise of nationalism and neo-Nazism. And Trump is is Trump fully anti-Semitic? I don't know. His daughter is technically Jew. She's converted. His grandchildren are technically Jewish. So is he anti-Semite? I'd like to say no.
I think he seems a lot more, at least from this term, he doesn't. He's actually, what do you call it, an evangelical Christian.
He's not, but yes, he claims to be. Yes, he claims to be. He's only been divorced 3 times. I don't know if they allow that in evangelical Christianity, but maybe certain sects do, especially the one in Florida, who's now is a Christian White House advisor who allows you to pay for going to heaven. I believe that's her deal. I believe that even evangelicals consider that too extreme, and that they actually have said she is not really a pastor. But
I mean, he says he's an evangelical Christian. And so from that, a lot of people make inferences. Also, the presence of the Israel lobby in America is quite powerful. And so people tend to say whether or not he wants to, there is too much forces to defy or too many people to annoy when he chooses to not go in the favor of Israel. And I don't know whether you saw earlier this week, which is one of the controversial things he did. He released this AI footage of a new Gaza where he proposed to relocate all Gazans to other Arabic countries and then rebuild with some Trump towers, whatever. And he in this AI-generated video, there was him and
Netanyahu
on the beach
sipping Mai Tais.
I'm like, what is Trump doing? What does he want?
Well, when I was done watching the AI video of him licking Elon's toes, and then I watched the AI video of Zelensky slapping him in the Oval Office. I did turn on that video quickly and see. And listen, Trump is he's a megalomaniac, I would probably say. The idea of moving 2.5 million Palestinians to nearby countries that sadly don't actually like Palestinians and don't appreciate their people, including fellow Muslim nations like Jordan and Egypt, who refuse to take Palestinians in because of the problems they've caused in their countries. I don't mean Trump to be anti-Semitic, but he's just in a sense like, so I don't fear per se, as we call him a Nazi, I don't fear another Holocaust per se, but I do, could there be groups of people that are marginalized in an extreme manner by him? Yes, I do think that he's maybe capable of that in the long run.
He has this weird way of solving problems that seems to, at the same time, make the thing worse. And it's similar when we come to Ukraine, and we'll get into that. But how do you propose moving an entire nation and spread them across multiple nations without consulting them about whether that's what they even want to begin with? And it's like, that's how to solve the problem, and I'll build a Gaza Plaza and a Gaza City and make this whole place a new pop-in town that they can hop in and come and take some drinks and go back to wherever we've moved them to. And it's like, how do you think people are going to receive this?
I don't think he worries about that, because I think he lives in a dream world. I don't think he actually believes that this would ever happen. But again, I think he's also using his position to throw around his power in a sense, and to make it seem like, if I wanted to do it, I could. I don't want to do it. I don't really want to do it. But if I wanted to, I could do it. And I think that's what Trump is in a nutshell. He's a lot of hot air. And yeah, he likes to make himself look good. So anything he can do to pump himself up, and sharing of AI videos, this is not the first time he's shared AI generated videos that have been very offensive to different groups on his social media platforms.
Truth Social.
Truth Social, or is he back on Twitter yet?
Yeah, I think he's back on Twitter.
Okay, I wasn't sure if...
I mean, Elon owns Twitter. He's definitely going to be
I mean, I know. Well, I don't know, because Elon, I'm not sure if he wants his vice president to be able to speak freely. Elon likes having the power. But no, I don't think Elon's president. I do think he bought the presidency. I think there's a difference. But yeah, I don't know. I think he just likes to say, we used to have the saying diarrhea of the mouth.
Yeah.
And I guess Trump is diarrhea of the fingers, and he can't stop himself from typing stuff. And I think the world would be a better place if people typed messages and then thought to themselves, do I really need to send this? And then without actually thinking about it, just said no and deleted those messages, and then put their phone down for 10 minutes and let things calm down. But Trump is not like that.
Yeah.
He's a 24/7 tweeter.
Yeah.
He doesn't, and he never has nice things to say about anyone. So I would never expect him to not be controversial in any type of posts. So that video is that one's a special one, and the issues. But I just guess talking in terms of, does he marginalize Muslim peoples, Mexican people, or other people? Yeah, I mean, I see it as a possibility. Things like that do scare me.
Yeah.
I saw an article this morning that the U.S. government's now being sued because apparently he is actually shipping migrants to Guatemala illegally, who he has no right to ship to Guatemala.
Yeah.
So I think these are the issues I'm saying. So basically saying the law doesn't apply to him, and he's free to do whatever he wants, and to harm people in a sense any way he wants to. And I don't see how shipping people to a foreign country.
He's gone as far as threatening a judge who blocked an appeal that he did, and said, good luck,
daughter.
Good luck in retirement or something. And
it wasn't that. He posted the daughter's actual information online, so that the daughter was now susceptible to what the judge, the parent had said. I don't know if it was a female or male judge. But he's never held accountable. Because listen, if you were ever going to hold accountable someone, you would charge him with a crime, you'd take him to court, you'd have him convicted of a felony, and then you'd put him in the White House. You'd put him in the White House. I don't think something's off about that, but maybe that was in the Constitution.
I mean, one final bit on his especially the executive orders that he did. Some of them seem to be not just local, but very, very international. For instance, withdrawing U.S. again from the Paris Climate Accord, fast-tracking fossil fuel projects and making sure that oil is big in America again. And he's overhauled asylum and border policies since day one and all that. And you're asking, which of these is really affecting instantly a lot of Americans?
Well, I think, the executive orders have been so many and so hard to actually sort through and track. I mean, to see which ones are really affecting Americans right off the bat immediately, it's tough to say. But if it's not immediate, does it really matter in the long run? And I want to point out, you mentioned something about the Paris Climate Agreement, and I'll just say, the Paris Climate Agreement is kind of a load of garbage. Countries that have signed it haven't held up their end of the bargain. There's no actual means to hold anyone accountable if they don't live up to their promise. So in the long run, jumping out of something like the Paris Agreement, I don't care. That doesn't affect people, and I know people get upset about it, because of course we should. What affects Americans and what affects the world, in a sense, that outside of the Paris Agreement, I believe I saw an article that I read, Trump is signed an executive order to cancel all of the EV push, for government vehicles. Not only has he canceled the ordering of EV vehicles, he's actually ordering the backwards, go back to oil. So I think in the long run, it was supposed to save several $1 million a year just in the cost of fuel. But now we're going to go back to paying for this fuel, so we're not going to save that money. And we have to pay to remake the fleet of U.S. government vehicles into gasoline-powered vehicles. So we're sitting on all these electric vehicles that now I guess we're going to sell at a loss. I actually don't know. Who knows what they do with them. and then we're going to buy all these new vehicles. So he's going to cost the American taxpayers right here millions and millions of dollars every year just because he doesn't want to go green and doesn't want to admit that climate change is a real thing. So
I think that's a lot of people's problem with the withdrawal from Paris Climate Accord. It's not the accord itself, because a lot of people don't think the accord is doing much. It's the position from which that decision is coming from, which is that he doesn't care about climate change. He doesn't think it's real. He several times said, well, in fact, when the fires broke out in California, he said, well, the Democrats' governance structure in California has blocked water supply to just put up the water. Yeah. And I'm like, just admit for once that climate change is a real thing and start dealing with it. But he just doesn't care.
Well, I think his backers financially and the billionaires who are going to be making money off of lots of oil, wherever that is, whether that is in U.S., whether it's in federally protected land that he unprotects for the sake of drilling, whether it is in our future 51st state of Canada, if he ever gets what he wants, and, oil and Greenland oil, and all this is about resources and enriching himself and his wealthy crew. So, the Paris Agreement, it's not that but I think in general there is an attack on science, and I hate to say this. It's not just his climate people, his who is it, Zeldin, who's a New York guy who's the head of the EPA. COVID, so listen, if that's the thing, like if they want to prove what they want to prove, then just show me the science. Show me science that says climate change isn't real. Show me science that says global warming's not happening. Listen, the same thing when you mentioned COVID. Show me science that says it comes from where you say it came from. If you want to blame people, then just show us the science. But they're not for science. They don't believe in this. His new health secretary is anti-vaccinations. It's quite scary. They're removing medical information from websites, scientific information from websites. They're halting research into all different kinds of medical diseases. And
one tricky thing about his position on climate is, I thought, and this was when Elon got into the race and backed him and all that, I thought if there was one good thing that could come out of Elon being with Trump, it was because Elon owns Tesla. Tesla is an electric car company. So maybe it would influence his approach on the adoption of green tech and electric cars. And I don't see that perspective of Elon's influence on Trump's policy. It's like they've gone to some sort of agreement that this is the point where Elon loses out on the climate fight, and he just keeps his Tesla deals and interest away from Trump's government.
I don't know if Elon believes in the climate thing anymore. I'm serious. There was a tweet that
someone posted.
There's a tweet someone posted from 2017 of him being upset about him backing out of the Paris Climate Agreement and how absolutely necessary it is. And where's that? And I don't know what Elon actually believes in anymore. As far as I'm concerned, he's got way too much money, and I don't think anyone with that much money can actually think straight. He's apparently also on ketamine 24/7. Now, I've never done ketamine, but I bet you're not thinking straight when you're on a horse tranquilizer 24/7. And again, when no one is there to tell you no because you're worth $400 billion, who's ever going to tell you no? When you have 14, he just had a 14th kid, right? That's real news. So he's got a 14th kid now by a sixth different wife.
So shocking when I saw that news, though.
Sorry?
So it was so shocking when I saw that news.
Well, it's only because it came out a week after his other 13th kid by a secret lover came out. So I don't know what Elon really believes anymore. The science thing does scare me, though, because Elon's supposed to be a man of science, supposedly, but he's not really a scientist. He's not even really an engineer. He really just pays scientists to work for him and do stuff for him, and engineers to do the same, and then he takes credit for being a genius. So that's at least my general take on him. And sadly, we are at a point where it seems like science is the enemy, and I think that's pretty sad when we are at a time where we have...
It should probably be our biggest ally at this point.
We have more knowledge about science than ever before. We have computers and AI ability to find out more, do more research scientifically, models, computer modeled, and things like that than we've ever been able to do before. And so it should be a peak of enlightenment. But as I like to tell students sometimes, I think the internet killed humanity's ability to progress. I think since I first went online in 1995 on AOL, I sadly feel like we haven't made very many positive progressions towards a future society that will last a long time. So.
Yeah. Let's come back quickly to immigration. It became a big thing during the election. And for a lot of Democrats, I think there was a piece published by the New York Times, just I think days to the election or so. And they were so enraged by the fact that they had to wait too long to publish and amplify what the Biden administration had actually done. So what the strategy that they used to sort of deal with immigration was to try and stop it within the region from getting to America, as opposed to stopping it at the American borders. And so there was this night gala with all regional leaders from the American subcontinent. And essentially what he did was give them funding so that the routes that people use to come to America through these other neighboring countries, they stop them there rather than getting them to come to America. Because typically what used to happen was these border patrols from these other countries and immigration officers just didn't care so far as you weren't going to stay in their country. They would just allow you to pass and you were going to America. And so what Biden did was eventually start stopping them within these other countries, and it led to a decline. There was at this rally where Trump showed a graph of immigration, where he had cut off the 2025 part, which actually showed the decline. And so for a lot of people, that started a trend where they said, well, Biden has done very, very horribly on immigration. And I don't think the optics also helped with Kamala not really being able to speak to what exactly they had done on immigration and what exactly the results were. Now, what Trump is doing is taking it a whole new level. He's essentially stopped whatever funding and whatever strategies that Biden was trying to use to stop immigration. He's now used a much more aggressive approach, which he promised, but a lot of people thought was crazy, to literally pack people, haul them, and ship them over to wherever he says they come from. And he didn't care, to the point where he's saying even being the child of an immigrant born in America should no more give you citizenship. And I'm not sure how you feel about his approach to immigration, that's far, because for a lot of people, that has probably been one of the wildest approaches to American immigration crisis.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard a lot of the immigration issues from my friends who are working in New York City, which obviously were one of the big recipients of migrants shipped to them via Texas and other places, and just generally always collects people because it is such an international city in a sense. And yeah, I mean, immigration's always a tough one. I think the Biden numbers are, I think you really need to study the numbers to see what's really true. Because from one organization, they're going to tell you Biden was terrible on immigration, and others will tell you he actually was pretty good. He actually had less migrants come during his presidency than Trump had during his presidency. Yeah. So I think it's a really tough issue, but it is a huge issue, and it is one that clearly was able to give Trump a leg up on Democrats, because Democrats don't really have a policy on this. And I think the policy that hurts the Democrats most is that we want to put U.S. taxpayer dollars towards supporting these illegal immigrants inside the country, as opposed to spending that money getting them out of the country, which is really Trump's take. So you've seen obviously lawsuits that Trump's has put forward, his cabinet, I guess I'd say, his people, towards stopping these cities from putting money into the pockets of migrants. Yeah. So that has been one approach. I mean, obviously shipping people overseas, at a great expense to the American taxpayer also. I think one of his big ones has obviously been threatening countries via these tariffs, in a sense. And if you aren't going to stop immigrants from coming through your country freely to our country, then we will have to figure out a way to punish you, in a sense. And I don't necessarily disagree with that. The issue with, birthright citizenship, I think it's a tough one as well. I do understand why it was passed, obviously, and I fully support it. It is in the Constitution. Yeah. I think what I have a problem with Trump's biggest issue with him trying to end birthright citizenship is that we have a U.S. government that is meant to pass laws in a certain manner, and that is not by executive order, as I mentioned earlier. Yeah. So if Trump and his Republicans are truly, really against birthright citizenship, then this should be
Congress.
Yep, this should go to Congress. It should go to the Senate,
Yeah.
and if they both settle on agreement, and then it should go to Trump. And if he
These
signs
are votes they would get also because they have the majority in both houses.
They have the majority, but I think they need 60.
The percentages.
I think they need I think they need the 60-40, something to that effect.
Yeah.
To actually put in something like that, which is also why nothing really gets done in America anymore, because we sit at like a 52-48, and generally you can't pass anything by that.
Yeah.
And then when these officials, these politicians go back to their constituents and they're like, well, it's not my fault. I tried to get this passed. So if you don't vote for me and you vote for the other guy, it's never going to have a chance. So vote for me again and I'll keep trying for you. And we end up with basically no progress, years, election after election after election. And really, sadly, the two-party system and the way the American government is built, it doesn't really work efficiently anymore. I hate to say that, but I
think one problem that people had with Biden in his approach to immigration was that he basically, to make immigration stop looking illegal, he put in place a very simple process where people who were considered illegal immigrants could now just go through that process and apply legally by reducing the requirements, reducing the bureaucracy in there. It was a simple application. You fill it and they ask for a few details, confirm if you have a place to stay in America, if you have someone who is coming to house you. And once they check all those boxes, they just allow you to enter. And that meant that legal immigration went up, but illegal immigration went down. But it didn't necessarily mean that immigration went down in total, right? Because he just put a line there that shipped a lot of people from the illegal front to the legal front. And for a lot of Americans, that seems like you are still spending our money either way.
I think most Americans would just like immigrants to do it the proper way, where you apply for it from your home country and you get approval and then you come. And I guess that's kind of the view, is like play fair, play by the rules. Now, I agree with that in a sense, but listen, we're lucky enough to come from a country and have a country that these people want to go to, that they want to be in. That shows that it is still a great country.
Trump wants to make it great again.
He wants to make it greater. He wants to make it great, but not great enough for the immigrants to want to be there. He just wants to make it great enough for them to kind of want to be there. I don't know. But at the same time, Trump is now selling a $5 million gold card.
Yeah.
So, I would like to know how.
But the tricky part of that gold card for me is when Elon, and I think, no, it wasn't Elon. It was the other guy in charge of DOGE. I've forgotten his name.
Big Balls?
Is that his name?
I don't know. The 19-year-old whose grandfather was murdered by the KGB for being
the guy who is co-chairing DOGE with Elon.
I don't even know there was a co-chair. I thought it was just
there's a co-chair. I've forgotten his name. He's also one businessman in the US. And he made a Twitter post, I think a few days after Trump's inauguration, and said, well, you cannot have a country where, and it was about H1, I think.
That was Vivek Ramaswamy.
Yeah, Vivek is co-chair of
terrible
DOGE.
Person,
yeah, so Vivek is co-chair of DOGE with Elon.
I didn't know he was chair of DOGE.
He was co-chair with DOGE, so that with Elon of DOGE. So the two of them are working.
It's amazing how these people that Trump shot all over in the primaries.
Yeah.
That he said isn't even American.
Yeah.
Would then be happy to go back to work for the guy.
I mean, it's the money.
Well, yeah, it's like Ted Cruz's wife. Ted Cruz's wife murdered. What was he? He was a Cuban. He murdered Kennedy, right? And then yet he's pulling for Trump. And then Marco Rubio, who he was, is now a Secretary of State, although maybe not for long after the incident the other day and him disassociating in the couch in the office.
So Vivek says, well, you can't have a country who claims to be the best and not have a system that allows the best of minds to come in there. So the best brains from science, tech, AI, whatever should be allowed, easy access into America. And then the GOP went after him. In fact, the MAGA fan base just went after him. Yeah. It was a heated debate on Twitter and all that. And then Trump turns around and says, you know what? Yeah, let's sell a golden ticket to allow people to come to America.
Well, I actually don't think it's 1-1. I think I think they're two separate issues, to be honest.
Yeah.
I think the H-1 visa has been an issue in America now for probably a decade or two, in a sense, because we do invite or allow all of these brilliant minds to come from all over the world to attend our universities.
Yeah.
But then we were kicking them out of the country, which is really stupid. It's like, if you're going to train these people,
why not allow them to stay and benefit from them?
Yeah, why not benefit? Why not have them help build our economy and build industries and develop technologies, in a sense, and move us forward? So we weren't doing that, and that was very controversial, and I do believe it is something that America should maintain. But that is an academic thing where we're asking people to show their ability to kind of contribute to society, in a sense. Whereas this $5 million gold card is just asking who has enough money to buy these cards. And if you are, you get a green card plus. And then there's also the question, what is a plus? Does that mean you're allowed to commit 2 crimes once you're in America? I mean, is it a pass to do something that other people aren't allowed to do? Do they have a plus more than me, who's just a regular American citizen? Like, this is, I think, the issue they have. So I am all for the H-1 visa, in a sense, and I can understand why even someone who I don't agree with, like Vivek Ramaswamy or Elon, would support that. And even Trump would support that. But I think the gold thing is a totally different issue that came completely out of left field, and probably is $5 million to get into the country, and then a 2-year lease at one of my buildings, one of Trump Towers or one of his hotels. And then at that point, you're officially in. That's my assumption. That, I got into a little bit of an argument with a buddy here in Hong Kong who's also from the States, and we were talking about it, and I was open about my view that I just personally don't like Trump. I think he's a grifter, a con man. I don't think he's a nice person. I think he's very uncouth, in a sense, and I do think that his actions are very much meant to enrich himself. And he's like, how? And I said, what do you mean how? He's definitely doing things to circumvent. He did it in his first term. That was his first term. How's he doing it now? It's like, wait a second. So you think that he enriched himself in his first term, but now he's turned over a brand new leaf, and he's not going to do it in the second term when he has even more power? He's been given immunity, and he doesn't have to worry about getting elected again, because he'll either make himself king, or it won't be a matter, because technically he's not allowed to run. Although there's already talk that he's going to executive order himself into a 3rd term as a possibility. So who knows? But I think the question of immigration obviously is a big one. It obviously is an issue that is a strong reason he won. There's a strong reason people back him. I seriously heard it from a lot of people in New York.
It was the same song he was singing in his first term, when he said he would make Mexico pay for a wall. He's going to build a Trump wall. The Trump wall was one of the headlines of his campaign. I'm still waiting for the wall.
Oh, he built like a mile of it. He just didn't realize that the border is like 1,500 miles long. But I don't know if he realizes stuff. It's possible someone showed him a map, and they showed him where the wall was, and he took a Sharpie and he drew the rest of the wall and just assumed it's done because he Sharpied it. I mean, he did that with a hurricane once. Anything's possible with this guy. I personally, I think in general, he's there to enrich himself. He obviously, he pandered to people's fear of immigrants and the outsiders and minorities, and that allows him to win.
But let's get a little bit away from Trump and more to the American population and the fear of immigration and where it comes from. Because I understand the rhetoric in the outside world. I might not be able to understand exactly how it feels to be a native and the perspective you have on immigrants living within the space. But what the rhetoric out there used to say is, well, these are people who are taking our jobs, they are taking our houses, they are the reason why housing prices are up, they are the reason why grocery prices are up, because the demand is high and supply is low. So immigration gets blamed for almost a lot of the basic standards of living being difficult to access in America, like the traffic, the transport, and almost everything. And the question is, where does that fear of immigration come from? Is it really that immigrants or things are that competitive that immigrants make it difficult for natives to access realistic opportunities and meaningful standards of living?
I don't know if it's that. I honestly, I don't think it's this fear of what you just mentioned in general. I think that's all stuff. And anyone who actually researches, the reason we can't afford houses is because, well, most homes that are not owned by individuals are now owned by private banks, or they're owned by landlords who have significant numbers of properties and are able to raise rent to whatever they want them to be, and they have so much money that they don't have to worry about anything else. So the haves and the have-nots. Groceries, I really can't blame on immigrants. Job opportunities, maybe. But again, we get to this idea that what job opportunities are immigrants taking? If you're looking at migrants, what are they taking? The unpaid, the low-paying jobs on farms, and the low-paying jobs cleaning offices and cleaning toilets. And in a sense, like, Americans really aren't looking to do those jobs. What I see it, and I hate to say it, is I think there's just generally a fear of other people that look different than you. And I notice it, to be honest. Being a Jew and going back to New York last year, which was a few months after the attacks in Israel, New York is noticeably less Jewish than it once was. It's noticeably more, I would say, dark-skinned people that you get the feeling are Arabic of some sort. There are more of these people around. They're working in stores. They're working on, they're working in the, every, growing up in America, going to New York, every corner at a hot dog stand at it. Now everything is a halal food stand, and everyone working there
so people are seeing the world change in front of their eyes.
The world is changing, and people don't like it. The world is, they see people that look different from them, and I think people are really afraid of a world where, everyone isn't just white, and everyone, and like, I'm lucky enough to live in a city where I'm the minority, and you kind of see people just get along and they deal with it, but there's racism here, and it's not just unique to America, that's for sure, but it does exist, and if you ask me, I think a lot of it is that. I mean, my town, my area, Long Island, growing up was a lot of Jews. Mostly whites. Now it's a lot of Asians, a lot of Indians. My hometown in particular, and I hear it from people. Oh, they're Indian. They just moved in. Oh, you could see the lights for the Diwali, and I'm like, well, what's the problem? But it's like people aren't into it, and I hate to say it, is a level of racism in a sense, and
it's a perspective I've never thought about really. Obviously, because I couldn't appreciate it, but just the way in which you put it, that. Imagine a child who has lived in a neighborhood and see it evolve from having neighbors who all look like them to having teenagers who all look like them, and then start maturing and see almost the food shops, the grocery shops, the spice kiosk and everything, and the restaurants evolving and changing to be this diverse or different. Probably I get how the change is so visible for a lot of people beyond in ways that I can't appreciate it. And then that explains sometimes where the fear comes from.
I think it's happened. Listen, I mean, cultures have always mixed in a sense, but it's been a much slower time in a sense. But we're never, globalism has never been as
this intense.
And quick to change. So in 20 years, you see towns go from, mostly white to mostly Asian and Indian. And you're like, wait a second, what's happening to the town that I lived in? I've owned this house. And it's like, listen, things change. But they're changing faster than ever. And one thing,
a lot of people would probably have this perspective outside of normal society, but maybe it's difficult to transfer it into real life societies, that people are very adhesive to change. People really struggle to adapt to changing environments and changing processes and changing standards, and are much more reluctant to want to stick to old processes, or at least processes that they are comfortable with, than to change all the time.
Let me pose it to you like this, and we live in obviously Hong Kong, and it's very much obviously if you know anything, it's a Cantonese city. Different people than Han people. There's a lot of mainlanders coming into Hong Kong, and you know what? The locals, they don't really like it. So you could say it's a race issue. I don't know. Is that considered a race issue? Is it just considered a language issue? Is it a culture issue? I don't know. They're both Chinese, but at the same time, there's some resentment at that. So, it's easy to say if there's resentment in the States because, people of different colors are coming in, and I'm not saying it's right. I'm just saying it's understandable in a sense, because that's what our human nature over thousands and thousands of years, what we developed. Outsiders are, I think, a threat.
That's what I'm agreeing with, and that's what I'm getting to appreciate now. And I'm just saying, we sort of are a lot more understanding of people when this position is taken in a different context, but we're a lot more like abrasive to them when this position is taken in the context of cultural and societal interactions. So if you had somebody, let's say a manager who had stuck to a process and they are a little bit adhesive or reluctant to change to a new technology, you go like, yeah, I understand why, because he's found this technology, this old system to be efficient for him. But if that same manager lives in a neighborhood that's changing and that manager is less reluctant to be embracing of that change, we go like, no, you should be embracing that change. You should allow, you shouldn't be opposing it. And if you do it, you're racist.
But I think, I think that's the problem when you start labeling people as racist just because there are fears and there are doubts and hesitations on that sense. I think that's really obviously a problem because then that makes them a little bit...
even worse off. They take a much more defensive position.
Yeah, it becomes much more personal. Yeah. It becomes, I don't know. I think also, though, to be honest, if we look at the way the world has gone in the last 20 years since 9/11 and the wars that happened and then the Arab Spring in a sense. I mean, I think there's a general fear in America. I mean, obviously, religion, if you want to point out Islam and what our knowledge of is it, knowing it's a peaceful religion generally, but there's always extremists.
Radicalization.
All extremists, But I think they look at Europe, and I think this is something you see in Europe now. Europe, maybe it's not talked about as much yet, but Europe has had an upswing in right-wing nationalistic movements. And this is a reaction to simply too many immigrants from the Middle East coming to these countries. And are the immigrants doing anything wrong? I think that's also a question that's really hard to answer. A lot of these people do not want to mix cultures. They don't want to change and adapt to a European Western culture. They want to kind of keep their thing going, and they don't adapt. So you get these people like, well, if you want to come live here, at least be like us. And you get these people like, we're not going to be like you, but we're going to come live here. We're going to keep coming, and we're going to keep coming. Eventually you get to this point where the people are like, well, if we don't stand up for ourselves, if we don't stand up for our culture will disappear. Our culture will erode. And I think that is happening in Europe. I think there are a lot of countries that are seeing this.
There's always this thing that bugs my mind, which is we sort of lose sight of when and it's a difficult position to be in, but there's this shift in history where at some point the majority from historical context slowly shift into not to become the minority, but shift into the position that the minority were once in. And especially in that transition period, it's so difficult to objectively notice it that they experience it, but we call it bluff, or we say it's not really what it is.
Yeah, but I also think you talk about historically it's happened, but it's happened over time and slower, and it's never happened faster. We've never had millions of immigrants from one country enter one country in a year, right? It never was like that. And
that's true.
It has been ongoing now for like 20 years with the Arab Spring and Syrian refugees. And, you look at these countries, even the Norways and Finlands, who are generally very accepting and liberal people, they're starting to see some sort of reactions because people aren't willing to lose their culture if they're going to accept people. It's kind of this thing. If you want to come here, be like us. Don't make us be like you. And I think that happened in America as well.
I think there's a part of it that has been maybe... there's this popular quote that was said within a relationship context that uncommunicated expectations is premeditated, I think, anger or disappointment or whatever, which is more like Europe and Western countries, also to a large degree, conditioned people from the less developed countries into expecting acceptance from them, which is government policy of embracing immigrants, government policy of offering scholarships to people, smart people from the outside world. And it's not a bad thing. I just don't think anybody thought about it to this degree of exactly what complications could come out of it. When now there's a whole trove of it, but then you don't clarify to what really are you expecting from them beyond you giving them opportunity and hoping that you look good and have some soft power and get some smart people into the country? To what extent is it going to affect your people? How are the people going to react? What cultural adjustments are you looking for? What societal expectations do you have of them? And people don't adapt that much because hey, culture is really, really personal to a lot of people. And so it becomes this thing of you adapt, then don't erode mine, but I'm just holding my end of it, but you are also eroding mine, and it just becomes a tug of war that never ends.
Yeah, and I agree in that sense but I also think it's becomes a focal point for people to pour their energy over being upset about other things.
Yeah.
And I think it becomes a me versus them because we're both kind of struggling to get by.
Yeah.
As opposed to if everyone was doing great,
nobody would
really
care.
Yeah, no one would really care if like all these people who are in America who are making, $60,000-$80,000 a year, maybe if they're making that much, poor people in the burbs and poor states and things like that. If they were making more money, there was more money in their economy and better opportunity, would they really care that other people are coming in
That's
and
a fair
making
point.
the same amount of money or even a little bit more, even if they're working harder?
Yeah.
This goes back to my whole thing about trickle-down economics being a complete load.
It's failed.
And if, I don't know how many... If you do the math, and I didn't have time to crunch the numbers, but if you do the math, and let's say we put a cap at no human being needs to have more than $5 billion in assets.
Yeah.
5 billion seems like a good number. Normally I'd say 1 billion, but let's be nice to Elon and Bezos and Gates and whoever else and say, what if we capped it at $5 billion?
Yeah. Take
the rest of the money they have and put it back into the economy. Redistribute into the economy in some way, whether it's to people or to jobs. Then everyone would be so much happier if that money was redistributed to people. If people weren't working for $7.50 an hour, 40 hours a week, and can't afford to pay their rent and also buy food. Yeah, people are angry.
Though, is meritocracy a hoax? More like a little bit off topic.
Is meritocracy a hoax? Clearly not. There are aspects of our civilization and society that requires meritocracy to accomplish anything. But yeah, there are times when at some point meritocracy stops working and you run into someone who has more money than you. I'll just buy your idea. Or you could work for me now. Now it's not Elon Musk. It's not a meritocracy. $400 billion, not because of things he invented personally. Maybe an idea he had, but he didn't actually make that idea come to fruition. So should he be worth $400 billion? My take is not really. But even if he had the idea, even if the technology was his and he was worth does he really need the money? Wouldn't the world be a better place? I mean, listen, this has been a big issue the last week, people putting forward the idea that he's trying to do. He was just on Joe Rogan talking about how talking about Social Security being the biggest Ponzi scheme ever invented because it'll never pay out in the long run. Well, if you cut it, sure it won't pay out because you're going to cut it. If we taxed you and you put all your money into it, it would be paying out for the next 100 years. And wait, so one person would have to suffer for the sake of everyone else in the entire country? Should we? I don't know. That's like, to me, that's an easy decision. Kill him and take his money and put it back into the economy. And I hate to say that, but it seems like an easy decision. Now, I'm not doing it, so don't arrest me or don't prosecute me. It's not my idea to do it. But to be honest, it's very simple. Like if he didn't exist and his money was even in his 14 children's hands, at least it'd be more spent because those 14 people would have to spend money instead of just one person spending the money. So meritocracy, does it exist? Sure, it exists. But does other things eventually outweigh that? Does, it definitely does. Does nepotism outweigh it? Certainly does at some points. I mean, we live in a city like that. We live in a city with both. We live in a city with definitely meritocracy, people who earn their money and work hard and definitely deserve it. And we live in a city with tons of people who have inherited their money and their positions, and they probably don't do any better than a random other person could do. So I don't know.
I mean, one last question, and then we round up the immigration talk, which is Trump has been a lot more aggressive towards the regional leaders, like countries within the Latin American region. Like he's gone head to head with the Colombian president, Guatemala not being a fan of whatever he's doing.
I thought they're the ones who want to take in prisoners for money. I think actually they're okay with it. It's not him. It's Colombia.
Also because he's offering money. It's similar to what Britain did with Rwanda, where they paid Rwanda to now take the illegal immigrants that were coming into Britain, basically.
We're not paying corporations in America to take our prisoners, so why not just pay a country to take our prisoners and save
fair
the money?
enough.
Yeah.
But The question I'm asking is, Biden sort of sought to work on immigration by uniting the regional leaders and sort of giving them an incentive to fight immigration on behalf of America. What Trump is doing is basically breaking down whatever relations that Biden had spent the last 4 years building. And I'm wondering what effects that will have on immigration moving forward.
I mean, I actually think in this sense, Trump's policies towards the poorer nations probably will be somewhat effective, because if we start threatening those nations where we give significant sums of money to, then they will kind of have to kowtow to his demands.
Yeah.
Will it stop people wanting to flee those countries?
Not really.
Possibly not. It could lead to many humanitarian issues in these countries, unless he's willing to give enough money, in a sense, to help support these people.
Yeah.
I'm not against his. I'm not against it. What I think bothers me is to do it so openly in the public. I think to bring these fights, to claim victory over the Mexican president and over the Canadian prime minister, kind of serves no purpose. I mean, everything he held Canada's feet to the fire for had already been promised to Biden 5 months earlier.
Yeah.
So he didn't really accomplish anything new except trying to make himself look forceful and powerful, which to most people he ends up looking like a clown because they see through it. To Mexico, I mean, if you want to play hardball with Mexico, I mean, what did we really agree to with Mexico? That they'll stop allowing drugs, fentanyl through the border and stop illegal immigration, and we'll stop shipping weapons to their cartels? I mean, I don't know. Is that a fair trade? I honestly don't know, because now we're the ones at war with the cartels.
Yeah.
So I honestly don't know what it really accomplishes. I think my biggest problem with him in terms of, because you ask, it's foreign policy in a sense, and immigration. Not immigration specific, but I think it's the way he addresses people publicly. Yeah. And it's like to demean them and
combative.
To make him, and there's no reason for it in a sense. And it goes, and I'm sure you're going to bring it up shortly, but it goes to the issue that happened this weekend with
This
Zelensky.
is a perfect segue to it, really.
Yeah, what is the point of yelling at him and telling him he hasn't thanked you when he has thanked us?
Yeah.
You know, the count has been done. He's over 30 times. He said thank you to the American people. Like, what does JD Vance want? Him to put on his eyeliner for him? Like, you know.
Why isn't he wearing a suit?
Yeah, I mean, well, yeah. And Marjorie Taylor Greene's boyfriend being the one to ask him that question. Like, wow, what a coup, MTG. Your boyfriend got to ask the question. Aren't you so proud of him, as she tweets out? You know, like the whole party, they're a joke.
Yeah.
They are a joke. They are, as they said, a bully. It's the best way. It's the best words to use for them. They are a bunch of bullies that want to push people around.
Do you think he had a point though with what he was saying in
about
the
thanking, or about the no cards?
Not about the thank. Not about the thanking. It's that
I have all the cards.
Is that in Europe, the countries who are basically supporting Ukraine are doing it from a point of more like a loan, where France, Germany,
it's all a loan. The U.S. is a loan too.
The U.S. has been given, let's say, a significant portion more of free money than majority of European countries have.
Okay. Where's that money going? Let's look at this. That money is then being spent in what country? America, to buy what? American weapons, so they can ship those over to Ukraine. So America's basically just giving weapons
to Ukraine
via cash that we're getting back. So basically we're stimulating our own economy to give free money to them. So is it a problem?
That's an interesting way to put it.
I mean, do they have a certain point? Should he say thank you?
I think sometimes Trump has a point, but goes about the most terrible way to execute it or to make that point.
Yeah, I mean, from what I've read and what I've seen, apparently this was J.D. Vance wrote the playbook to this one. He wanted it. He's got a bone to pick. And also, you remember, Trump doesn't like Zelensky because he asked Zelensky for dirt on Biden. And he didn't. And it helped lead to his, to one of his, was it just one of his, the
lawsuits that he got.
Lawsuits, and then, him being impeached, I believe, and that stuff. Yeah. And so he has a bone to pick with Zelensky. First of all, just you're the president of the United States, the most powerful person in the world. Show it. Act like it. Don't scream at someone like, you don't have the cards. I have the cards. Like, first of all, you bankrupted a casino. You're the only person who may have ever bankrupted a casino. Stop talking about cards, because it just reminds people of how inept you are at leadership. And then you see the people he surrounded himself with. Marco Rubio, they're joking about him going into disassociation on the sofa because he was so embarrassed. You know, J.D. Vance, who... You know, he stated multiple things. Once he stated that he would not like the U.S. to be in Ukraine at all. We should never have given Ukraine anything. So if you take that stance, then why is he even there? Right? He shouldn't be commenting to anything to Zelensky. He doesn't support the whole act. Let him not be there. Also, this is the guy in 2017 said that he doesn't like Trump. Trump shouldn't be president. He would actually maybe consider voting for Hillary over Trump. And yet he's now his vice president. So what I'm really sick of, I'm sick of these Republicans who talk about Trump and are honest about Trump and how bad he is. And then as soon as he offers them anything, they kowtow to him and act like that never happened. So
I think once they saw that the presidency was real and the comeback was real, they were like, whoa, we have to fall in line now.
And that's my biggest problem with the Republicans at this point. This was their one chance to probably do away with Trump and to insist that they didn't put him up for election. And to be honest, anyone they put up probably wins. If Nikki Haley is elected, is nominated, she probably wins. This was their chance to get away from this guy, to escape his
grip
umbrella,
on the GOP.
his grip on the GOP, and get out from under him. And they proved to be basically spineless, most of them, like Mitch McConnell, who's now he's sad as he's fallen over a few times and he's no longer going to be, like now he's sad and says Trump shouldn't be there. Great, Mitch. Thank you for that. A little too late. Your legacy to the American people, Mitch, is that you left us with Trump, not once, but twice, and allowed him to come back. That's what his legacy is to the American people. He surrounds himself with people who are just awful. They're not equipped to do the job that they're being tasked to do. And they're really putting American security at risk. That's what I would say.
We have a few more minutes to go. And obviously, I wanted to talk about Elon, Vivek, and Department of Government Efficiency. Now, these guys said they've uncovered probably the American government to be the biggest fraud in history, the biggest fraudulent organization, the most bankrupt, that should have been filed for bankruptcy for God knows how long now. And they essentially say, it's not running on budget. But one of the things that I've also known that historians and both political leaders have always said is that you probably want to run a government efficiently, but you can't expect it to operate like a business where you make profits, especially when you're not willing to tax the people that deserve to be taxed more.
Yeah, you can't make profits at this point as a country the size of the United States. You're not supposed to, because if you're making profit, it means you're not spending all the money that you should be spending to help people, whether it's in the country or outside of the country. It's not a business. And reading, and I watched an interesting YouTube video by, I don't want to call him an economist, but generally someone who discusses geopolitics, and he had a take on Trump's tariffs, and he spoke about James Garfield and the tariffs, I believe it was Garfield, who he put on, and that was his whole process, and how it worked for the United States at that time period because we had such a large trade deficit. But it doesn't work anymore because we don't have. So basically the number we would have to tariff every country 50% to actually make the money that he claimed to settle our debt, to make the money, so we're never going to do it that way. Now, Elon and Vivek, the government clearly has inefficiencies. I worked in a local government before coming here. It was terrible. A lot of the people were appointed through friends and family of politicians, and a lot of them were, I'll just simply say, losers who weren't good at their jobs, were either had been suspended numerous times from the government unions, but because it was a union, couldn't be replaced. So there's tons of waste. I mean, my first day on that job, we had 15 people stand around a wastewater treatment tank at a time and a half. So, 1.5 times pay. When 2 people went into the tank and 15 people stood around watching them, and all of us got paid overtime for this. So I know there's tons of waste in the government, but that's going to happen no matter who's in power, whether it's a Republican or it's a Democrat. So you want to clean house. Well, you better choose wisely, but they're literally going through it without actually looking at it. And Elon's take is, I'm going to make mistakes. You're going to make mistakes, or this isn't like, this is like people's lives.
They're admitting that he's going to make mistakes without admitting that the mistakes are going to be costly. And that's the oblivion of it. But USAID has been his first attack, to the fact that most people knew it as USAID, right? Instead of the U.S. Agency of International Development.
We love acronyms.
and it's that people knew it for its aid distribution instead of actually focusing on the development of major projects around the world. Yeah. To the degree where there are universities in Afghanistan or in Qatar that were funded by U.S. government to give them westernized education. And with one stroke of a pen, all of those things have been shut down. AIDS medications being distributed across many countries have been stopped because of this. And you beg the question, the government needs efficiency, but is this the right way to go about it?
I mean, you're asking me, it's right. I would simply just say, no, it's not. I mean, does the government need to be audited? Of course, the government needs to be audited. And should there be some sort of checks to make sure that every worker is needed? Yeah, in a sense. But when we're talking about shutting down, something like USAID and saying that it's corrupt because all the money is going into the hands of the relatives of politicians in a sense, or their friends and family.
You sort of cherry pick the worst examples.
Well, yeah, but how about you give us examples? Like, that's my problem. So what was it? Stacey Abrams supposedly had $2 billion. There was $2 billion geared for a climate, a climate fighting, change fighting thing that Stacey Abrams was tied to. $2 billion. That's a lot of money. Okay, I want to see the paperwork. I want to know that it's really true. But again, as you mentioned, the AIDS. I'm watching John Oliver, I guess, last week, and I hate to quote him again or to cite him again, but they're interviewing. They have a news broadcast they're sharing from South Africa, and this lady's trying to go get treatment for AIDS at the clinic, which has now been shut down because the AIDS clinic was funded by USAID, and now that clinic no longer operates because there's no money. The money's frozen. So, I mean, as our part as a world leader, no, that's our job. We should want the world to be a better place. We also, by protecting people in countries like that, we hope to keep the numbers down in our countries. We hope to just generally keep the numbers down. Then again, we have a health secretary who doesn't believe in measles or mumps.
It's also almost zero warning. Because if you gave countries like, let's say, a 1 year warning to say, we're giving you 1 year, we're going to wean off all these programs and you need to find alternative funding, people would have found time.
There would have been better adjustments and accommodations made. What's being done is completely inappropriate. It's being done to prove a point. It's being done to show that they can do whatever they want. And it's being done to say that no one can stand up to us. We're the power now, so deal with it. And again, not exactly the most diplomatic way. I mean, part of USAID is, hey, we give your country's money to help with all your issues, and then we hope that when the time comes, you'll support us maybe in the UN. Instead, we're now supporting Russia at the UN. We're not passing resolutions at the UN that don't actually criticize Russia for starting wars. And that's a sad thing. When we're now closer allies with Russia than we are with Western Europe, I am definitely scared, and it is a huge issue. And I don't know this is what I look at, like, to my friends and family who voted for the guy. I said, what are your thoughts here? You're okay? It's just Russia. It's like, no, it's not Russia. Like, is this what happened to all the 80s movies I saw that said Russia was our enemy? Red Dawn can't happen without Russia. Rocky IV can't happen without Russia. And I hate to make light of this, but guys, Russia's the bad guy. It always happens. Spies like us. Russia. Watch it if you haven't seen it. But generally, guys, like, they're our enemy. And now Pete Hegseth is saying, oh, we're not going to also plan cybersecurity operations against Russia anymore. Why? What is going on? I don't believe it, but I kind of makes me wonder, is Trump really this? Now they're saying there's an article that came, he was a KGB. Well, they're saying that he was an asset, that they had him, he went to Russia in '87. His wife, Ivana, at the time, who was Czech, her father was a member of the
KGB.
Was a member of the KGB, so his father-in-law was a member of the KGB. They say that, I read an article the other day, not to go down conspiracy holes, but Ivana was apparently in perfect health when she fell down the stairs and died a few months ago. Now, reports state that she was in poor health, but if you look at some of the interviews with her friends who saw her the day before at lunch, said she was in perfect health. There was nothing wrong with her. She magically falls down the steps right before he wins. a second term in the presidency. I don't know. Certain things just seem too convenient. No, I'm not saying he is.
Yeah.
But can someone even look into this? Can someone report and say it's not true?
It's concerning. I mean, it's really, really concerning.
Certainly, if it was true, I wouldn't expect Kash Patel to admit it. I mean, listen, Kash Patel's sitting on all these the Jeffrey Epstein documents that Pam Bondi made a big deal. We're going to release all the Epstein documents are going to come out because the public should know. And all they released was everything we already knew. They didn't release anything. They released his address book up to the letter S. Yeah. They left out T through Z. But literally, like, it's almost a joke at this point. Yeah. I mean, like, we're living in a world that, we're approaching idiocracy in a sense, and it's a scary time. That's where I would say we're Trump.
One final question on the serious things before we do a quick fire section is who succeeds Trump? Is the GOP going to get another chance to get off under Trump's grip, or is it that chance is gone? And there are some people who say that there are speculations that he's going to anoint a family member.
Well, so I was joking with that I imagine it'll be Ivanka because that's who he wants it to be, and I think that'll be the first woman president, and that would make him very happy. That would be my take on this. Generally, I only feel like he could get replaced if he is that terrible. Well, he is, but if enough people who vote Republican really find that his behavior, his policy
made things worse,
makes things worse, and not just worse, because I don't actually believe if they'll blame someone else for worse. Scarier. I think if they actually believe that the world is a scarier place in 2 years, then you will see a blowback to the point where, maybe you get a ticket of Nikki Haley and Josh Shapiro, and you get a right-wing, left-wing joint forces for the office. Maybe you get a ticket like that. I don't see it happening. I see him saying that he's going to go for a third term. I do. You could laugh at it, but he's going to probably approach this idea that it's meant to be 2 consecutive terms. And since I didn't serve 2 consecutive terms, then I am allowed to serve a third term. There's also a chance that maybe he's killed and J.D. Vance is put in his place as a simple, basically Elon Musk, monkey, do what I say and dance, monkey dance. And that's how I could see Elon, possibly, because I don't see J.D. Vance having any ideas of his own, period. It's a scary thought, though. I think it's a great question. Personally, I see him staying another term if he's healthy enough, and if not, I see Ivanka as being his selected successor. Yeah.
This has probably been one of the most detailed and interesting, but also very, real conversations about America I've had in a very, very long time, because there are hard parts of the conversation where you just have to appreciate other people's perspectives. And a lot of the time when you speak to people, it's like an entrenched position from which they speak. But you do one thing which is really, really interesting for me, which is you at least acknowledge where other people's positions are originating from. And that helps also to appreciate why they behave in the way in which they do, or why they pick the positions they do. And it's been a really, really interesting conversation.
I'm not a psychologist, but I try to see it because, like I said, things scare me, and you try to find some sort of reason. You try to find some sort of explanation for things. This is human. This is our, this is what we do as humans. What we have always done is simply why religion exists, because we try to find explanations for things that we just simply can't explain. So that's it. I will say, as an American, and my and this being a podcast, and my knowledge only being of Joe Rogan, where's the whiskey and weed? Does that come out at any point soon? Or I came for a podcast. This doesn't seem like I got the full setup.
So there's actually this show we do at the Shafts podcast, which is called the Beer Parlor, and even that I've said there's no beer on the show.
No beer on the show.
And people go like, how the hell is there a beer parlor without beer? But let's do the quick fire questions, and then we have like 5 minutes to wrap up. Okay, so quick fire questions. Number 1, do you believe that life has an inherent meaning, or do we create our own purpose?
That's a great question. How's that a quick fire? How do you answer that quickly? I guess if I had to say, I'd say that the meaning of life is for us to find meaning with life and enjoy it as best we can, in a sense. And whatever that we do enjoy, we might as well take part in. Whether that's good or bad, sadly for some it's bad, and hopefully for most of us it's good.
We just hope that it's bad for you alone and not for the entire world.
Yeah. But unfortunately we know that there's a whole penitentiary system filled with people who like to do
bad things for everyone.
You know, and we know that if laws didn't exist, there would be a lot more of this.
The second question is free will an illusion, or do we truly have control over our choices?
Oh, that's a perfect question, because I'm trying to think about what I'm up to tomorrow, and I'm trying to decide, do I have free will to choose, or do I have to go somewhere I really don't want to go? I think in a sense that free will does exist, but only to a certain degree. I think at some point there are things that we need to do, and we can't avoid those responsibilities.
I had a really powerful quote about freedom, I think 2 days ago, which was like, freedom really is our ability to choose what we enslave ourselves to. So it's not that you exist outside of forces that influence you. It's just the ability to choose to enslave yourself to which forces influence you.
Yeah, well, I think in a sense, freedom is the ability to follow your passions and choose what you do. In a sense, kind of like what you're saying. It's just that most of us do not have the ability to freely choose to only do what we want to do without having to do other things that we don't want to do.
Can true happiness be achieved without experiencing suffering?
No, of course, you need some sort of balance. And how could you really appreciate the greater moments, the finer moments in life, if you didn't also sometimes find yourself sitting in an office that is not where you want to be?
Yeah.
But I'll spare us the details.
Is the concept of self an illusion, or is there an enduring essence that defines who we are?
That's not an easy question. Of course, there's a self, but I think in oneself, there is also others. At least for me personally, I don't find, I don't think I could find joy and purpose in just being with myself and having no other selves of other people's to think about, to worry about, to improve or make worse. So I think in that sense, then, you know, there is obviously our own self, but we need other people's to even be ourselves.
Do you believe that time is something we experience subjectively, or is it an objective reality?
I mean, sadly, time is objective. It does exist. It's real. It passes. But I think for people, it is also subjective, because there's obviously
different experiences.
Times goes slower for people at times. Times goes faster for people at times. So I think generally it is individually subjective, but I think in the long run it is, of course. If I sit in this chair long enough, I won't be able to get out of it.
Okay. If you could live forever, would you choose immortality, or would you rather have a finite life with purpose? Kind of interesting quick fire.
Yeah, I mean, is it just me who's immortal, or is there anyone else I can bring with me on the journey?
Just you.
I mean, even when the world's over, I'll still be there.
Presuming the world is never over.
Oh, well, one day. I mean, at some point our sun will expand and then envelop the earth, and would I still be there for that?
Maybe.
Then I'm going to say a finite period, because I don't want to be there. I don't like the sun that much. And at that point, I don't think there'll be enough sunscreen for my pasty ass.
One last question. Do we have a responsibility to find the truth, or is it enough to live authentically based on our personal beliefs?
Okay, I think this is a great one. I think everyone should live how they want to live, in a sense, as long as it doesn't necessarily interfere with other people's living. I think people should hopefully want to find truth in this world and see things for how they are. At the same time, obviously, that's not always going to be the case. And we also know that truth can be subjective. So in that sense, not really sure what to say to that one.
Well, thank you so much, Michael.
It has been my pleasure. Thanks for having me, Andrews.
Thanks for joining us on this episode. And definitely you should leave your thoughts, your comments on everything that has been discussed in this lengthy discussion about America, immigration, Vivek, Elon, Trump, and basically everything that America wished, or majority of Americans wished America wasn't at this moment. Thanks for joining us, and see you on the next episode. Bye.